to talk about anxiety and why I left the corporate working world and basically worked on my own business. Um, I've been working for the corporate world probably close to 30 years, maybe 30, 35 years. Because basically I started working ever since I was 15 years old and so forth. And over time, when I was working at different either retail, office jobs, something changed drastically. Now you're talking about going from the 80s into the 90s. We're talking about this period. Um, HR, I believe, changed, and the accountability on jobs changed. And one of the things that I noticed was you were held accountable for your work back in the day. If you messed up something, you were, you was pulled into the office. Sometimes they would, get you right then and there and be like, Carl, you effed this up, blah, 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 whatever. Obviously, that's a stressful situation, and people don't like stressful situations. And obviously, you don't want to be called out on anything. But I'm that type of person. It's like, if I did something wrong, I would rather know what I messed up, how can I correct it, and how can I do better the next time around. All of that was fine with me. And a lot of times back then, the risk and reward issue on the job actually worked. It was like the higher the risk, the higher the reward. And I work for a lot of bottom line people, meaning I don't care how you got there, as long as you get there. In other words, if the goal is, for example, if you're selling computers and you needed to sell 50 computers, if you reach that goal, however you got there, as long as you didn't do something ethical, unethical, or illegal, or, that would put the company at risk, then, attaboy, they'll celebrate. They may give you a bonus. They may give you a raise, promotion, whatever. And you had yearly evaluations. Basically, if you did your job the entire time, you would definitely get a very good evaluation, a very good, I guess you could say, a raise that was, comparable to what you've done and so forth. But you felt more like you were in control of what was happening. And if they had budgetary issues and so forth, they would tell you up front, look, I wanted to give you 10%, but I gave you 3%, you know. And usually they would make up for it because they would do other bonuses throughout the years. And I'm generalizing the work environment from the 70s and 80s. You had a lot of, I don't want to say misogynistic behavior there, but there was a clear line between who was management, who were employees. And this was the last part of when you could actually say the word secretary in the jobs before they became admin assistants, executive assistants. I don't know what they call them now because I haven't been in the corporate world in about 10 years now. But there was a stark contrast with that. I remember my boss at a law firm that I worked at in DC actually fired the HR department. Good luck trying that nowadays. We're talking, 2022 here. It was just a different environment. And basically in the 80s, the late 80s, that was pre-computer. So imagine going to work and you have a desk and so forth, and you don't have any sort of laptop, no tablet, no, desktop computer there. You actually had a pad and paper, a legal pad, letter pad. You had your pens, scissors, whatever that was required for the job that you had. And you actually had to write out a lot of stuff. So imagine how much time that would take to do all of that. And our office mail, which was a large, it was probably bigger than a legal size, I would say. It's not ledger size, which is 11 by 17, but it was like probably like 8.5 or maybe even 9 by 18 or whatever. I probably post a picture of it in this video and so forth so you can understand what I'm talking about. So you have this environment where you're working with bottom line people. The goal was to try to get stuff done within the timeline. You will multitask. I mean, it was true multitask. There were no classes unless you had to go to a seminar. And I had an employee back then, they used to say cinema. I don't know whether they was joking or whatever. But anyhow, he was like, yeah, Carl, I'm going to go to the cinema today. I was like, is that like, donut, or is that, you know what I'm saying? Because the way he said it one morning or whatever, maybe he was just tripping off of something, I don't know. But anyway, they used to go to seminars then for anything that they need to learn that was different, because there was no online courses to go to, because there was no online, there was no internet. Okay, so I'm giving you kind of the environment where it's a 9-to-5 job. You're in the corporate area, in the corporate arena, and basically you had to produce. There was the ultimate accountability was what you produced. There was no, oh, I couldn't do this task because I had these classes to do. I couldn't do it because I had anxiety. I couldn't do this because I'm stressed out. It's like back then that was the term. If you were, boiled down with a lot of stuff or bogged down with a lot of stuff, and you needed to take some time off, they was like, well, hell, I'm stressed out, I'm burnt out, I'm going to, take some time off. And usually they like, all right, take as long as you need, depending on the company you work with. Some of them were harder than others, just like nowadays. Well, I'm gonna get to that later. But anyhow, taking that environment and everything was accountability based. The hiring practices back then were, I like this guy, I like this girl, I'm gonna hire who I want, Then it would work out sometimes, it wouldn't work out sometimes. It would work out more that it didn't work out, because you usually picked the candidates that you wanted to hire, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of background, because you felt like they was the most qualified to do that job. I was a manager there at the law firm, and I hired some folks there to the point where people who actually, some of the attorneys would actually come into that department to actually, I guess, fraternize with the staff, to put it mild and so forth. I had the philosophy then of hiring good-looking folks, and I know I'm going to get slammed for this because it's a whole different time and different era, but you're talking about, 90s, probably like early to mid 90s. It was a whole different standard then. So my philosophy was hiring good-looking folks that people wouldn't take off as much. Because it's like, oh, I gotta go to work to see what such and such is doing, or, just to be around that environment. So I've always been a person where if you learn what the system is, backward and forward, then you can take risk, once you learn what the system was, whether I set it up or somebody set it up, that was irrelevant to me. It's like, learn what your job is before you try to go to something else, because that could lead you to other areas, and you've proven yourself and you've proven your worth. And that philosophy was always brought down to me, like, Carl, learn your role, learn, what this organization is, what your department does, and good things will happen. And good things did happen. Um, I left the law firm because they was going through a merger and so forth. And I wouldn't know what my role was in the new company or who was the lead company on that merger, because usually the lead company would have all of the power, obviously. And you would always be subservient to whoever the lead um, company was. But that's irrelevant for this discussion. So basically, to get back to an HR perspective, it was like HR was there to mediate. Um, HR obviously wanted to look at employee growth. They had some say in the salary, but that was really brought on from what the management wanted to pay you versus what the industry wanted to pay you. And I'm sorry if I'm like looking everywhere, because I'm thinking because sometimes when I'm talking and telling a story, I tend to go back into that time and I can visually see everything that's happening. So forgive me for that. Um, so it was really based off of, what management wanted to pay you. They would use HR as a guide to say, okay, what is the industry standard for this particular position, and would this entail to this role, and so forth. So management directed HR. HR did not direct management, which is how it is today. So over time, when I left that law firm and went to a financial institution, it was like night and day. HR was more heavy-handed in decision-making process, even though they say, oh, well, it's not us as management, but it was them too. You tend to find the accountability wasn't on the one as opposed to the team. And I kind of had a problem with that. I felt like the work that I did should be the basis of my evaluation, not the basis of what the whole team is doing. Now, if you're doing team evaluations, then everybody needs to be in that room at the same time, not the individual being in that room. I felt like if there were issues within the group that was team related, then let's have a meeting and basically hash it out. They don't do it that way. They go into, now, the time period we're talking about now is in the 2000s here. They go and have basically classes that you have to take that actually has nothing to do with the work that you do, and they call it team building. And I was new to that. I was like, what in the living hell is team building? Some of it was fun because, it's taking you outside of your duties. If you were an accountant and you never had anything to do with, let's say, IT, or you had nothing to do with, the mail room, or, engineering, whatever. They take two dissimilar departments, put them in teams, and do team building exercises. One, to get to know your coworker in a different light. Two, to work with your coworker that you may never get to work with. And sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not, And I just felt like a lot of resources was wasted in that, because there are specific roles that happen in every organization, and team building didn't necessarily mean that you had to use that as a function of the organization, and I think they played to that too much. So then, if I'm just using fictional names, I'm not using names of actual co-workers. So if Janet, completely botched, some task that she did, and she got, nasty with somebody there, instead of them holding Janet accountable, we would have a team building exercise on customer service. And, you know, basically, I always call it desensitizing classes to make you not, act your character. It's like they taking what your natural reaction is and try to make it professional, which is good, but you could have a conversation with somebody about that instead of trying to get the whole team to do it. Or you can, do a seminar where people sign up for it and, basically get everybody done at the same time instead of just waiting for an incident to happen. Do a team building exercise on it. And then everybody has to take this class because one person messed it up for everybody else. And then that person is never held accountable, you know. But then when you try to approach that person and they call it coaching nowadays, again, 2022, they call it coaching. Back then, it was just like, look, you confronted somebody, like, would you stop effing this up for everybody? Excuse me. Because it's like, we have to go through all of these changes because you're not doing this, and it's usually a personality flaw, and instead of addressing that personality flaw with somebody, it was like, I don't know if it was a lawsuit that happened, if people felt like they was being ostracized or whatever. And I started then, instead of hearing the word stressed out, you started hearing anxiety. I am not making a knock on mental health at all. I mean, because if people have true anxieties, you need to seek professional treatment for it, because because everybody comes from a different background. I understand there's different environments that you come with, but I think people play the mental and anxiety card a little bit too much. Okay. And the reason why they do that, because they don't want to be held accountable for their own actions. It's like, it's okay for me to curse you out and tell you what you're not doing and so forth. And I can slam stuff on the table, throw a stapler at you and all this other stuff. And then when HR gets involved, oh, I've been having all these issues and I really didn't know that I was going to react that way, and I'm sorry, I'm going through so much at home. I have to deal with this, I have to deal with that, and then when I come here, I have to listen to so many people tell me that I'm doing this wrong and I can't handle this. I don't know what to do with myself. Okay. It's like, look, there's a difference between stress and anxiety. Stress is getting out of your comfort zone for a little bit, whether somebody pulls you there or you pull yourself out of there. And, you react to situations that you never dealt with before. And, typically with stress, you get that heart racing and you get that, shortness of breath. Sometimes, your stomach feels kind of messed up and, different things happen, obviously, because you're outside of your comfort zone. But anxiety is like this constant pressure that you either have put on yourself or somebody puts it on for you. There's an environmental issue there. There's a true mental issue there. There's something else going on. Not everybody has that, okay? But a lot of people go to that to avoid accountability for their actions. It's just like somebody that goes to church every Sunday and say they're a Christian, but then you see them, at happy hour, you see them go to a hotel room with somebody that's not with their wife or husband, whatever, and then they'll tell you everything that you're doing wrong, but then when you call them out, it's like, well, I'm a child of God, and, I would never be of such, and, you don't know what I was doing. Okay, whatever, slick. So, it's like, people want to do stuff to avoid accountability. You see that a hell of a lot now today. And why I got out of the corporate world, HR has way too much power over situations that really they should mediate, not mandate. That's one thing. The tone of the working world nowadays is you have to do more stuff in order to do your actual role. Most of the time when you look at a resume and you look at, well, not even a resume, when you look at a job description, there's always a little line there that says duties as assigned. That's always the out for them to get you to do stuff that's outside of your skill set. And I understand that you have to learn and grow, and then you have to fill in roles and so forth. Hell, I mean, everybody has to do that. But there's a difference between core business stuff and outlier business stuff. And that's where I'm getting at with the classes and so forth. You have all of these classes. I think there should be like a core professionalism class that would entail customer service, entail professional behavior in the workplace, how to resolve conflicts if you have conflicts, how to actually address problems without necessarily getting HR involved. They always say you can go to any manager, any supervisor. Some of them don't want to hear that crap, you know. But there should be something like that as an introductory before you get into your core business. That should be part of the onboarding process. I would love to have somebody from HR, you know, get on and we can talk, you know, put it out there on podcast land, YouTube land, whatever, and discuss that. But I think that should be the core part of your early training, and then that's it. Then when certain things happen, you can hold people accountable for their actions. They do it ass backwards. I mean, and I'm not saying every organization does it the same way, but they need to figure out a way where when you do your onboarding process, have all of that taken care of. Okay, we check professionalism, we check conflict resolution, we checked, you know, how a person should conduct themselves with people inside the company, outside the company, so forth and so on. You know, we've taken care of all of that. Now we have to evaluate how this person is working as in terms of, you know, their daily routines and stuff like that. And stay out of it and let that person do their job. There's probably more time wasted doing a lot of these team building exercises, a lot of these, you know, areas of correction and coaching that has nothing to do with your core job. If you're an accountant, you're going through data, you're going through, you know, numbers, you're going through, you know, interdepartmental type of transactions, you're looking at the general ledger, so forth, so on. And, you know, conflict resolution has very little to do with what you're doing there. You may interact with some people to figure out, okay, where did this transaction come from, and, you know, where do you want to class this, so forth and so on. Obviously, I was an accountant before. I've had different roles, you know, from IT to accounting to being in management and so forth. It was like you could not do your core job because you had to deal with personalities that needed, I wouldn't necessarily say discipline or correction, but they needed to be held accountable for what they've done or what they could do if they continue to act the way that they act. So, saying all of that, I just had enough. Um, when I went to HR for the last time at one of the companies that I worked in, I was like, you know what? Just going through this process of me, having an issue with one of my bosses, and I'm gonna tell you, the bosses I've had over the years, some of them was decent, some of them was bad. I mean, everybody has that. You're gonna work with some people that you love. You're gonna work with some people that you hate. There's gonna be conflicting. Notice the word conflict a lot. You you have conflicting feelings about them. You may like them as a person, but hate them as a coworker. You may hate them as a person, but love them as a coworker. And then you can have the other thing where you love them and then you love their work. So you're just going to have that everywhere that you go. And when it comes to diversity, you can't teach diversity. You can't include everybody because everybody is not equal. You know, the DEI model is going to kill a lot of corporations because you're going to hire people that really don't know what the hell they're doing. And then if they did know what they were doing, they're not a good mix for that company because their personality doesn't gel with what the core values of the business is, if they even have core values. Because nowadays they losing all of their ability to have values because they're being dictated by outside forces that's not changing the revenue stream at all. And you get executives that have this philosophy like, they're more worried about perception than reality. And you're losing a lot of customer base, you're losing a lot of potential employees, you're losing, you know, you're just, it's a lose-lose situation in the long run. And the work environment, to me, gotten a lot worse. So when I had this confrontation with my manager at the time, I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to quit on the spot because it's something I never did before. Um, because it's like every place that I was put at, it was like, what is wrong with these people? You know? And it's always somebody that it's just like a relationship. You go into a relationship with the good points of the person that you love. If I'm dating this woman, it's like obviously the good stuff brings you in, but you stay with that person because there's bad traits that you're willing to tolerate. And if those bad traits get worse than the good traits, as in terms of what impact it has on a relationship, it's like you can't take it anymore. You're done. And just like with her, she'd be like, I can't take Carl no more. He's an idiot. I need to get away from him. So it's like I just had that point where I'm sitting there in HR, I'm looking at this nonsense that's being put in front of me. And I was like, I can't take it no more. I was at that particular company for 17 years, and I was like, I was there probably 10 years too long, because I should have left after 7 years because I should have saw the handwriting on the wall then. Yeah, I got moved up and I got different things going on, but I just never felt like, you know, that company was worth me being there. And a lot of it was just the culture. It's like this corporate culture was, yeah. So when I moved to Florida, and I moved my company to Florida because I always had a small business. Always worked with computers, did websites, did contract work, so forth and so on. I always been set up as an LLC. So when I moved to Florida, I did get into the state government for a little bit, because I kind of always had this thing that I wish I had joined the military. I had a chance to join the military when I was like 17, 18 years old. And I let my mother, even though I wasn't living with her, talk me out of it because I had got an apartment early. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast, YouTube video. But when I talk about her, but I let her talk me out of that, and I joined. I was about to join the army, and she was like, I don't want my son going out off there, and then they get into a war and all of this, and at that time, even though I wasn't living with her because I got my own place, you still listen to your mom. I'm from that. I'm probably the last generation that listened to mom and so forth. So, but I'll do a whole nother video podcast on that. Um, I was just like, going back to the job and so forth in Florida. I was like, well, let me work for the state. I enjoyed it, but and I wasn't there that long. I was there for like a year. I got to know a lot of police officers. Um, I got to know some of the core staff, you know, um, and it was a good experience, but it was the same, you know, logic with no accountability. I, I couldn't work for an organization that doesn't hold people accountable for the stuff that they mess up. And it's like, it's all right for you to act stupid, but then when you call somebody out for acting stupid, you're the bad guy. And it's like, the same stuff came up. Oh, I have anxiety. I have this. And it's like I couldn't take it anymore. So I was like, let me devoid myself from the working world and actually do this on my own. I always made more money doing my business than I ever did working for any corporation. So I was like, instead of me just having this philosophy like, oh, I need to stay there because of the benefits, let me pay for my own benefits. Let me just, let's take a leap of faith and see what my company can do with me being behind the helm the first, wave of it. Name look back since. I should have did that like 20 years ago. I should have just went on ahead and went, all in back then. But, you listen to other people and they tell you, oh, you're making a mistake. I don't think you should do that. Well, I don't think you can, be around and, well, what if this happened? Well, what if that happened? Well, I don't think, look, when it comes to stuff like that, listen to yourself and, do what's best for you in your situation. Falling back on the anxiety, I know I'm jumping all over the place here. It's like anxiety is something where you can't function. You literally can't function. A lot of people that I know, they function just fine. They just don't want to be held accountable for their actions. A couple of women that I've dated, they would cry anxiety to smoke weed, do heroin or whatever the hell they would do. Beautiful women. I mean, God, they were like society nines, you know what I'm saying? Nines, some other people would say tens. I'm like, you can't throw out tens for everybody. It's only like 3 women in my life that I ever thought was a 10, But these girls, one was a solid 9, the other one was an 8. Some hate in the comments if you guys don't even do that anymore, but I still do. I'm old school. I'm in my 50s, so I'm old school. But it's like they would say, I have anxiety, I need to smoke this cigarette, I need to smoke this weed and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with anxiety or whatever. What was bothering you? Well, you will never understand because I'm a woman and you wouldn't, if I tell you, then you're just gonna, hold that over my head. and this weed and cigarettes and all this other crap is not being held over my head. You know what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, you have the problem, but we're together. So what the hell is going on with this? You know what I'm saying? Um, and I couldn't take it anymore. It was just like, you know, I just got so tired of this anxiety stuff and these fictional people that was hating these women, you know, and it's always somebody else that's doing it to them. And I'm like, have you ever thought about maybe looking in the mirror and saying maybe you're just making up this stuff, or you're taking an incident that happened to you and you built up this wall that you don't want to be in a situation where you don't want to be hurt. You don't want somebody saying something negative about you and all of this. The hell with other people, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes when you have a goal and you're doing certain things, you got to focus on you, you know. Do I have anxiety? No. Am I stressed out about anything? No. Do I have a lot to be stressed about? Yeah. I mean, but it's like you have to compartmentalize what you stress out about. I'm surprised I actually said that word the first time around. That's one of the hardest words for me to say, just like cellular. And I'm surprised I actually said that. But it's like when you take that, all these stressors, and you don't even have to dig deep. What are you bothered with? How are you going to handle this? You know, there's good consequences, there's bad consequences to your actions. The more good that you have will level off any bad that comes about. And you really have to take the time to think, is this really important for me now? And what is this going to do to me in the long term if I keep doing this? You know, you can't beat yourself up. You can't allow other people to control what you do. To eliminate anxiety means that you have to manage stress, because one leads to the other. The more stresses you have, the longer the stresses are there, they become anxiety-ridden problems later on. So if you eliminate the BS, if family is bothering you, get away from them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not talking about kids and so forth. I'm talking about, like, if you're an adult, you're on your own, that doesn't mean that, you know, your older cousin have to rule your life and you're not living in the same house with them. You know, you can have a heart-to-heart conversation like, look, I don't appreciate this bull that you're trying to put to me or whatever. Enough of this. I'm my own person. I can do what I want to do, whatever. The stuff that you're saying to me is not helpful. Let's get past this and move on. Sometimes you have to build up that courage to say something like that to some of these people, especially if they're friends, especially if they're family. But it's not helpful for you to be with people that don't have your best interests at heart. And especially if they're taken away from you, they're taking away your chance to be happy, healthy, and so forth. You know, mentally, physically, whatever. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out of there. The grass is greener, trust me. If you're in a situation where your job is giving you all sorts of hell, there are other jobs out there, especially nowadays after this pandemic. You got all sorts of opportunity out there. You are better than what you think that you are, you know. And if it's a relationship thing, you can't control what the other person thinks. You can't control what the other person wants. You may want them, they may not want you. They may want you, you may not want them. But you can't control what that person does. And the worst thing you can do is judge somebody else off of, situations that you don't know what they're going through, which is why I take mental health seriously, but I take accountability a lot more serious than mental health, because if you're accountable and you realize some of the situations you put yourself into, then you don't have to be in a situation where you are a strain on yourself. You don't need the alcohol. You don't need the drugs. You don't need to do some of these things to get yourself right mentally and physically. You don't want to go to a gym? Work out at home. If you don't want to, if you have problems sleeping, working out would help with that a lot. Just take some periods during the day to detox, work out, go for a walk, whatever. It's always better later on. You just can't dwell on situations where it's like, hell, you know, this other person got a problem, and now I'm stressed out because of what somebody else said or think. They are controlling you. You're not controlling yourself. But that's not to say that when you take control of your own life that you become narcissistic with it, because there's other people that's involved with your life too. Don't forget about somebody else. But I'm not going to go into a whole tangent about that. But I wanted to get to the point of anxiety and stress. Stress leads to anxiety. Anxiety is a long-term problem, not a short-term problem. And I think a lot of people get the two confused because, they don't understand something that's temporary versus something that's permanent. It takes a while. Trust me. I know it's difficult. But, you're not going to take it all in right now. But think about some of the stuff that I said, even if I rambled a little bit, even if I went off topic a little bit, I eliminated one part of my life that got on my last goddamn nerve, which was working for other people. Best move I ever made. I always look at this: 3 phases of your life that you got to have in order to be happy. Your home life. I live by myself, own my own house, own my own property, everything else. Love it. Your work life. I have my own company. I do my own stuff. I also do some gig work here and there. I'm Carl. I wear my name on my chest in case I forget. I'm good there. And your spirit. That can be taken up with religion. It can be taken up with causes. It can be taken up, just your overall health. Sometimes you just need to read a book, physically read a book, and get lost in it. Turn off the TV, turn off the cell phone, whatever, and get lost in that book. Go somewhere like a beach or whatever. Go to the mountains. See what nature brings to you so you can detox yourself out of some of these situations and realize and think to yourself, how many of those problems did you cause? How many of those problems did the environment cause? And I'm not talking about the environment like green environment. I'm talking about environment as in terms of situational. And your overall network, your family, your friends, do you really need to do this to be around them? Do you really need them around you to be you? All of that stuff you have to ask yourself. You have to start somewhere to get someplace else. So that's all I have for right now. And that's a lot to take in. But stick with me. There's a lot of stuff and I'm not, I'm just taking situations in different aspects. Some of them going to be hard, some of them going to be fun, and you know, stick with this. And then I might have guests on here, and they're going to share some experiences, and we're going to talk about all sorts of topics. Okay, um, I'm Carl, and I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself.